You bring a flashlight? Did I bring a flashlight? I got my phone light. You have a flashlight? Yeah. Oh yeah, wow. I'm the type of traveler that leaves all my expectations at home. You wanna go? I like when the places I visit define my experiences for me. So on this recent visit to Kentucky, I was ready to see everything it had to show me. That's fun. Thankfully, my trip didn't end there. I got a travel story to tell. I just got back from a road trip. I spent over 5 days driving around and I got to see Kentucky for real. I had a chance to hit up Carter Caves in Olive Hill. I met with Paul, the park's naturalist. I told him that I was feeling adventurous. And that's when he showed me that little cave with all the mayflies in it. But once we got out of that little cave, he showed me a bigger cave called X Cave. And X Cave was more of my speed. X Cave has 2 vertical joint passages that meandered through a large layer of limestone, and it put me up close to the beautiful cave formations. After that, we hiked one more trail and then I hit the road. The first place I drove to was Georgetown. There's a horse farm out there. It's called Old Friends. It's a place where thoroughbred horses go to retire. And I didn't know horses actually retired. I made friends with Michael. He runs the place. He tells great horse stories.
They asked me about the little horse and how come his name's Silver Charming. I said, well, this is Silver Charming. He won the Derby and he won the Preakness. And they go, what? I go, yeah. I said, when they come here,
We're gonna race them.
you know, in order to save money, we shrink them. So they don't eat as much, they don't take up as much room. It's worked out really well. And some people, like for like 2 or 3 seconds, they think, they're thinking about it. Maybe, how did they do that?
He seemed like the guy who knew everything about everything. So I had to ask him a very serious question. Where do I go to get a good donut around here? And he said,
The greatest donuts in the history of the universe are at Frank's Donuts in Georgetown. It's unbelievable.
I'll just let you take a wild guess to where I ended up next. Here's the travel tip. It's not hard to make friends if you love donuts. Everybody loves donuts. And if they don't love donuts, then they're probably more into apple fritters or something like that. Next, I drove to Buffalo Trace Distillery. Met a guy there named Freddie. You'd like Freddie. He's a natural born teacher that's very passionate and knowledgeable about bourbon. Within a few hours, Freddie taught me the ABCs of bourbon and a process known as waking the dog. And you know, I love all that. But in a place like this, I'm more of a behind the scenes guy. Take me through the process. Take me to the mash. I want to see it up close. If I'm going to be in a distillery, I want to see the steam, the industrial grit, the active pipes. Let me walk the corridors and visit random rooms that have liquids that are still making its way to the barrels. I don't mind taking the steps, as long as it takes me to one of the highest points to get that bird's eye view of the property. And thankfully, I did all that. Sometimes I try to tell my friends these travel stories, and they're always like, oh yeah? I don't believe you. I don't tell you made up stories. I tell you this stuff because I want you to be like, oh wow, I want to go to there. But anyway, I digress. Before I left, Freddie took me to where they bottled Blanton's. I got to see signature bourbons being filled, sealed, labeled, and packaged all by hand. Whenever I'm on the road, I'm always on the lookout for art. And a good place for that is Paducah. I like Paducah. There's a lot of art there. It's everywhere. It's even in the architecture. Look at the tiles on this wall. Crazy. In Paducah, there is a super long flood wall, and it has about 50 murals all by Robert Dafford on it. While at these murals, I met up with Kristen Williams. Kristen is the creative force behind Ephemera Paducah. It's an arts and crafts workshop space for adults. While I was there, she taught me the needlepoint.
And you work your way down towards the middle.
All right, so I wouldn't start from the bottom back up again.
Right, you don't have to do that at all.
Oh,
no.
okay. All right, I'm done.
Yay, you did it!
This was awesome.
You just gotta finish that little bit. You're the best student I've ever had. Oh my gosh.
I mean, that was quick, right?
That was quick.
Yeah.
You're just the savant stitcher.
I
I've
appreciate
never had someone like you.
Honestly,
do that.
I attribute it all to the teacher.
Oh,
So, thank you. This has been an extraordinary experience. I'm also a beer guy. and I wasn't gonna leave Kentucky without visiting at least one local brewery. I wasn't there 10 minutes and guess who I bumped into? Michael. I'm sure they have great beers, but it was the cider that caught my attention. At some point, I ended up in Bowling Green. I found this sandwich spot. They had a hot brown on the menu, so I tried it. It was pretty good. I paired it with a Kentucky-based soda called a late one, but the locals call it L8. One day I ended up at Natural Bridge State Resort Park. Natural Bridge has about a dozen trails ranging from easy to strenuous. But if hiking isn't your thing, just take the skylift. That's what I did. And on the way up, you'll see all kinds of beauty. I was a fan of this rock right here. The view at the top of Natural Bridge was pretty epic, and it was good for the spirit. I did a few other things on this trip, like take a history lesson with Bob Scott. He gave me the inside scoop to the Hatfield and McCoy feud. As a descendant of the Hatfield family, he would know. Plus, he has a ton of artifacts that assist in telling his story. I learned that this was a fireplace poker.
When you say poker, what are you talking about?
Poker.
Like a did you just stab me in the stomach? Like I got you on tape, Bob. You said no fighting, no fussing. You starting to fight, poking me with the poker.
After he poked me, he gave up a bottle of moonshine and a sip of some fresh well water from the backyard. So I'm guessing Bob learned his lesson.
Just personally, what do you think is the greatest thing to be learned from all of this?
Really?
Yeah.
Taking that poker and sticking you with it.
Thanks, bro.
All right, that's it. End it on that.
We're out of here, man. So now when your friends ask, what's in Kentucky? You can tell them horses, bourbon, music, art, donuts, sandwiches, beer, history, and of course, the outdoors. This isn't everything, but it's definitely a good start. I highly recommend you go out to Kentucky and have your own adventure. And hopefully I'll see you out there. Until then, take care.